Vegetarian Society of Hawaii welcomes you.
How many people in this room personally know someone that died of cancer? Look around the room. We have got to stop this. 1 million people in this country are diagnosed with cancer every year, and 1,000 die every day. It is almost as if a single World Trade Center tower were collapsing on our society every single day. We have got to stop this. Prostate cancer rates are rising every single year. All childhood cancer rising. Breast cancer rates rising every single year. In fact, cancer death rates are set to explode worldwide, according to the World Health Organization, thanks in part to our corporations exporting cigarettes and our diet around to the rest of the world. Look at that slide. 1 out of every 3 women in this room are going to one day be sitting in a doctor's office, and the doctor is going to come back in the room with a sad look on her face. She's going to stare down at the floor. She's going to say, "I'm really sorry, but it's cancer." Imagine how you're going to feel on that day. 1 out of every 2 men in this room are going to have the same experience, being diagnosed with cancer sometime within your lifetime. We've spent $200 billion on the war on cancer, yet overall cancer death rates haven't changed in 50 years. We have lost the war on cancer. We need peace. We need prevention. Cancer forms in 4 steps, and we can block them all. All cancer starts with 1 cell. We have 75 trillion cells in our body, and all cancer starts when one of those cells is exposed to a carcinogen. A carcinogen that mutates its chromosomes, mutates its DNA, turning it into a cancer cell. This is actually a photograph taken under a microscope of an actual cancer cell. Cancer cell which can then divide like crazy into a tumor which can kill you or your friends or your family, but we can stop it. Step 1. A carcinogen comes in contact with one of our cells. How might we prevent that step? Well, we can reduce our exposure to carcinogens within our environment. Okay? So, what are some common carcinogens? Anyone? Tobacco smoke. Fantastic. Others? Pesticides. Okay, well, how might one, for example, reduce one's exposure to pesticides? Eat organic. Certainly. Anyone know off the top of their head what food has the highest level of pesticide residues? And I'll give you a hint. It's not strawberries. Worse than grapes. In fact, worse than Chilean imported grapes. Worse than cheese. Worse than celery. Worse than celery. Worse than coffee. Worse than cherries. Meat, indeed. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, vegetarians have only 1 to 2% of the level of many pesticides and industrial carcinogens within their bodies. Only 1 to 2%. The most powerful known carcinogen in the world is a man-made industrial toxin called dioxin, like Agent Orange. That's a type of dioxin. When you hear about someone referring to toxic waste on TV, they're probably talking about dioxin. And through food alone, non-vegan Americans, meaning Americans that eat meat, dairy, eggs, are getting 22 times the maximum tolerable exposure set by the EPA for dioxin levels in their diet. So yes, populations across the world, Canada, Germany, here throughout Europe and the United States. Yes, we do get some from cigarette smoke. We do get some from just breathing our air. Can't do much about that. Here in the United States, we don't get a lot from horse meat products, but we do get it all from, if you look here, beef, chicken, pork, cheese, milk, eggs, and fish. The number one source of dioxins in our food supply in the United States. When researchers have actually taken samples from supermarkets across the United States and combined all the really dangerous pesticides and chemicals, PCBs, dioxins, put it all together, this is how much you get in your diet if you eat beef. This is how much if you eat chicken, hot dogs, fish, God forbid, ice cream. This is how much you get if you eat a plant-based or vegan diet. This study looked at the pesticide contaminants in human breast milk depending on the dietary habits of the mothers. They wanted to see those eating meat versus those not eating meat. And as you can read, the lowest levels of DDT, a banned pesticide, dioxins, and PCBs were found, of course, in the milk of vegetarians. Nursing infants with non-vegan mothers are getting up to 65 times the maximum tolerable dose of this toxic waste. Now, breast is still best even when we're exposing our babies to these levels of toxins, but vegan breast milk is better. The most prestigious scientific body in the United States, the National Academy of Sciences, recently released a damning report on the amount of dioxins in our food supply. And their number one recommendation was that all Americans need to reduce their consumption of meat. And they meant all meat, even chicken, even fish, even dairy. And the reason is that dioxins are stored in animal fat. And the higher you go up the food chain, the more concentrated these dioxins get. And you say, wait a second. Americans, we just eat kind of one step up on the food chain, right? We eat plants, and we eat plant eaters, herbivores like cows, etc. Why are non-vegan Americans still getting 22 times the maximum tolerable dose of this toxin? Well, for any of you who followed the mad cow disease story here in the United States, you'll know that there are no more herbivores in modern corporate agribusiness. Millions of tons of fat is scraped from the carcasses of livestock and goes straight back into animal feed. And then the fat trimmings from those carcasses gets fed to other animals, and the levels of dioxins gets higher and higher. Not only have we made pigs, chickens, cows into meat eaters in this country, but into cannibals as well. Let us take a look at the top of the food chain. Fast food restaurants. And if you can read this in very small type, it starts out saying, yes, dairy products, meat, and fish are the primary source of environmental exposure to dioxins for the general population, but it goes on to say, what about fast food? No one's ever studied that until this very important landmark study. They looked at McDonald's, Big Mac, compared to Pizza Hut cheese pizza, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And they found quite the toxic soup. Even DDE is how you measure DDT levels in foods, and you'll see this was a pesticide considered so dangerous it was banned decades ago, but still exists in our environment. And as you can see, ice cream follows a close second to McDonald's Big Mac. Wait a second, though. I mean, it's the dose that makes the poison, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if there are hundreds of carcinogens in these foods if there's not enough to actually affect. I mean, do you have to eat like 100 burgers a day to reach any kind of tolerable dose? Well, here's actually the data on quantity, which I will turn into graphical form to make it a little more easy. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, the maximum tolerable exposure to dioxins for children is 120 femtograms a day. Now, this is less than a trillionth of a gram. This is truly the most toxic substance known to humankind. So 120 is kind of the safety window for our children in terms of daily exposure through diet. Well, so how much is in these foods? How much is in a McDonald's Big Mac, for example? Is it like 50 femtograms, almost half the tolerable dose? Is it 100, almost a full complement of our allotted allowance for our children? Or in one slice of pizza, this is per serving, one drumstick, one scoop of ice cream? Well, let's look at ice cream, for example. Ice cream has not 100 femtograms, not even 200, but according to the best data we have, ice cream, a single scoop, has not 100, not 200, but up to 49,000 femtograms of dioxins in every single scoop. In every Big Mac, up to 50,000 femtograms. We're talking 400 times the maximum tolerable dose, but not worse than taking our children to KFC or Pizza Hut, where we are indeed exposing them to not 400, but almost 1,000 times the maximum tolerable dose of toxic waste. This is what it's doing to our daughters. There's a landmark study done at Harvard, looked at nearly 100,000 women, and Harvard researchers found that young women eating the most animal fat had significantly greater risk of developing breast cancer. According to this study, those that ate the most red meat and dairy had over 75% higher chance of developing breast cancer. Conclusion: intake of animal fat, mainly from red meat and high-fat dairy foods, during premenopausal years is associated, indeed, with quite an increased risk. That is one of the reasons why breast cancer rates continue to skyrocket every single year, more and more women every year. So, to help you and your family stop cancer, consider eating low on the food chain, and the lowest being a plant-based, an entirely plant-based or vegan diet. There are lots of other carcinogens in meat. There are the nitrites in processed meats, giving them that nice bloody pink color. There's heterocyclic amines in grilled and fried meats. In fact, you can actually experimentally demonstrate just how carcinogenic the diets of those that consume meat is. See, the DNA in bacteria is the same DNA that's in plants and people and animals and every other living thing. And so you can estimate just how carcinogenic a chemical is by dripping it on some bacteria in a petri dish and just counting how many DNA mutations it causes. The more mutagenic the chemical is, the higher the likelihood that it causes cancer, because it damages or mutates DNA. So, these Swedish researchers took these 20 meat eaters and had them poop in a thermos. Then they took meat out of their diet and had them poop in another thermos. And then they took a few drops of feces from each of these thermoses and dripped them on bacteria in a petri dish. And the feces of those eating meat caused 44% more mutations than those not eating meat a few weeks later. Researchers have tried the same thing with urine. They had some meat eaters pee on some bacteria, took meat out of their diet for a few weeks, had them pee again, and the urine of those eating meat caused 77% more mutations than those not eating meat. We have yet to look at other bodily fluids, but what the bottom line seems to be is that people who consume meat seem to be just oozing with carcinogens from their diet.